Sometimes it's really not that hard to skip over those sketchy looking links. This is the internet though, so we're constantly looking for our good stuff. We want solutions to our problems, and sometimes we see those links and we're like, it sounds good. I think it's legit. That's when we employ our good, trusty, hover over the link and see where it goes. Wait, what? It's one of those tiny links, you know the ones I'm saying? They're like crunched down to be like 5 characters long. You have no idea where this is actually going to take you. If only there was a way that I could find out exactly where this link is going to take me. Then I could kind of make a better informed decision, right? Oh, Python can solve this problem. So let's take this to our code. Let's make a little tool for us to figure out where in the heck these tiny little links are taking us. All right, we are in Visual Studio Code. I'm going to go ahead and activate our virtual environment. If you need a refresher on that virtual environment concept, go ahead and click the card and you'll get a video for that. All right, so now that that's done, I'm going to put this away for a second while we're doing our actual coding. And of course, every time we make a Python script, it's best practice to put this little shebang that kind of describes what this is. Oops. We're in Python 3. I'm going to give it even a description. The first thing that we're going to do is import a library that's going to help us do all of the stuff in the back end that we don't care about actually looking for the redirects and getting all of that information. So we're going to import requests. If you have not installed requests in your virtual environment anywhere, you're going to want to make sure we do this before we run our script. So we're going to say pip install requests. I'm going to clear that out. All right. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to define a function. So we're going to use def. I'm just going to call it check redirects, since that's what we're doing. We're going to want to pass in the URL. So whatever URL we're trying to figure out, where does this go, or does it even have a redirect? We want to be able to pass in that URL to this function. So this stuff right here is mostly just going to be standard. You're just going to type it exactly how you see it, even if it doesn't quite make sense to you. What we're doing is basically we're going to send the URL to this request library, and they're going to send us back some information. And so this is going to be how we're going to work with it. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to capture the response, and the response is what are they giving us back. So we're going to set this variable equal to requests dot get, and we're going to just give them the URL, and that's going to be the URL that we've passed into the function. So what we're going to do is we're going to check the response's history. So where did this go? So think of the history like a snapshot of all of the places that we went to from our starting position to our destination. So we want to now loop through and find out what were all of the steps, those mile markers on our journey from this place to this place. So we are going to loop over the history. So we want to look at for redirect in the response dot history, because we want to look at each step in the history. So I'm just going to call it redirect, since it could be, this redirects to this redirect to this redirect. So that's why I've named it like that. And then we're just going to print out what the URL was when we got to that URL. So I'm going to say print. I'm going to say .url because the URL is inside of this redirect object. We can even make a little else statement here, like let's say there was no redirect, like maybe it literally just goes where it says it will. So we're going to say if this doesn't have a history, if there's no, site A to site B to site C, then we're just going to say URL. This way we can say if it does not have a history at all and doesn't redirect, we're just going to say, here's the URL, and we tried it, it doesn't redirect. That helps me as I've put in this input, get something back if there is no redirect, and that's really good practice to make sure you know what's going on in your program. Before we go on, go ahead and hit that like button if you're finding this helpful. All right, so we're gonna go ahead, save this, and we're gonna pop back into our terminal just to see what happens here. We're going to test out our work here. Let's go ahead and we're just gonna open up a Python shell. So just type Python, and that should open up our shell here so that we can test it out. We're gonna say import redirects, because that's the name of the file, and since the file is directly in the directory that I am in, it's going to find it. So now we have our script loaded into this Python shell. We can go ahead and say redirects dot, and then we're going to pass in the URL as a string. So make sure you put in your quotes and your URL, and let's hit enter. And okay, and now this is really good. So we noticed that the output was not exactly what we expected. We just got the first step in the journey. What I forgot to do was to add in the last step of the journey, because it's not going to tell you the endpoint. It's only going to tell you the history, starting from the first step to basically the second to last step. And in this case, since there was only one redirect in the chain, it only showed us the starting URL, which we already had. So here is what we're going to do is we are going to, after the for loop has run its course, we're also going to print out. And this is a little bit tricky. We're going to do square brackets, response, and then we're going to do the first index in that array, dot URL, because that's what we want to get. That's the information we want to capture. So if we save this, so now we're going to jump into the terminal, and I'm going to just jump into the Python shell, and now we are good to go. We're going to import redirects, type redirects, and we want the function inside of redirects, which is check redirects, lots of redirects, and make sure we pass in the URL as a string. So don't forget your quotes. Put in your URL, and we're gonna hit enter and cross our fingers that this works. Yep, there we go. All right, so we can see that we started here on this bit.ly link, and then we ended up here on my other YouTube channel, which is awesome, actually. So we can see that this only redirects once, and we know that, well, YouTube's probably pretty trustworthy. We can see it's HTTPS, it is YouTube, it's not spelled in any kind of, strange way. So I don't know, I think it'd be probably a good link to check out. So let's test it out with a link that has a little bit more to it, just in case, just to make sure that we've got all of our bases covered. So I'm going to hit the up arrow key just so I don't have to type everything in again. Get rid of this URL, but not the quotes, of course. And inside of those quotes, I'm going to paste this other link that I've made. And we can see that it is printed out not only the start, not only the end, but also the stuff in the middle. So we can see that it starts on this domain, goes to a bit.ly link, and then goes to YouTube. So maybe that's a little bit more sketchy. If I were to see this out in the wild, I probably would not trust this, just because we're going through to 3 different domains. Who knows, maybe this middle thing is adding some kind of tracking or, something like that. Of course, this is not a security video or anything like that. Be safe on the internet, because there are real dangers by clicking on links, but this has given us a really good view into what's happening when I go to this URL. So now we've got our own tool that we can use to put in a URL at any time if we are feeling uncomfortable with it, and see where it's taking us. We can see all those steps in the process. If you want to learn more Python, go ahead and stick around on this channel. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one.